Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much, Jelani, for taking the time to speak with us today. Like I said, we have a group of really amazing young filmmakers who have experience with filmmaking, but they're here because they want to deepen their skills and also to get the experience of speaking with industry professionals. So thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
So yeah, I'm wondering if you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your career pathway in the filmmaking industry, and yeah, anything you want to share with us about what you're working on now.
Yeah, so hey guys, good afternoon. My name is Jelani Johnson. I have been working in Hollywood for almost 14 years now, actually almost 15 years now. I have done everything from client management, where I managed actors, writers, directors, to being an agent, where I represented artists on the other side of things. And now most recently, I serve as a producer, where I do everything from raise money for movies, to cast them, to actually physically spend time on set, overseeing the process, to lastly overseeing editing and distribution. So I'm happy to give you guys my story of how I got into this industry, because when I was 14, when I was in high school, right? Because you guys are a mixture between 14 and 18, right? When I was your age, I didn't even know that this world existed or this was possible. So I always love talking to people in your age group, because you guys are probably going to be my boss one day. At least a couple of people. I might work for a couple of people in this room. So thank you for taking the time. So where should I start?
Yeah, so if you could tell us a little bit about a little more about what a producer does from when you start working on a project all the way through the end.
Cool. So I feel like most people who are producers, or just most people who work in this industry, period, you are leveraging your life experience and your personal skill set to make movies happen. So I'll just give you guys some context on my life and how I got to where I'm at today, because all of that informs my work on a daily basis. So I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. Both of my parents worked corporate jobs. They worked at Procter & Gamble, which is like a big manufacturing company. I grew up there in the Midwest. When I was 15, my mother got an international assignment in Mexico City. So I actually went to high school abroad for sophomore, junior, senior year of high school. And, overnight I went from going to Ohio public schools to, going to a private school abroad. And it really changed my life and exposed me to different languages, different cultures, different customs, just different life perspectives. And I think that, I didn't know what God was preparing me for, but that exposure to different cultural perspectives has definitely been really helpful as I've traversed my career. After high school, I moved to New York. I went to Columbia University for undergrad, and I studied history and anthropology. And my whole mentality was like, I'm not really on campus to do pre-professional training. I just want to become the best person I can be. So I picked those majors because I found them to be the most interesting. I wasn't really worried about where I was going to work after I graduated, what job I was going to get. I think even back then I realized that the world moves really quickly, and the job that you think you might want one day might not exist 5 years from now, might not exist 10 years from now. And this is like, I went to college in 2006. So this is way before AI was a thing. The iPhone didn't even exist when I went to college. But even back then, I kind of understood that the world was like rapidly evolving and shifting. So I studied what I thought was interesting. My last summer of college, right before my senior year, I ended up getting an internship at CAA, which is a big talent agency. They represent everybody from Steven Spielberg to Ryan Gosling, right? Or Margot Robbie and Will Smith and everybody in between. So I got an internship there my last summer of college. And it was funny when I got in the building, I realized that without even knowing the kind of training I had, I was already super well versed in films. You know, I'm the oldest kid in my family. My parents worked late. I was very much a Blockbuster public library kid. So I watched a lot of DVDs, a lot of television, a lot of cable. And so when I got to LA for that internship, I could reference different filmmakers and different films and their filmography and different actors and the various like progressions in their careers. It just felt really organic to me. And I kind of fell in love with it. And so I went back to school, I graduated. After I graduated, my first job in the industry was working at this boutique management company called Generate. They represented a lot of like hipster alternative comedians. So at the time, they had like the Broad City Women, they had like Rebel Wilson, Eric Andre was a client. They had a few clients from Saturday Night Live. It was very much like a comedy company. And when I got promoted at that company, I was a comedy manager. I managed a lot of actors. I would spend like 2 or 3 nights a week in comedy clubs, signing people, writers, stand-ups. I very quickly kind of started to grow my list of clients to filmmakers. I remember I signed a director named Sheldon Candace, who was coming out of USC, and he wrote and directed this movie called Love that Common starred in. And the film got into Sundance in 2012. And I was a baby, but I was managing him. I went to Sundance. Next thing I know, I'm starting to speak on panels and just building my relationships and my profile in my career pretty quickly. A couple of years into me working for that company, me and one of my friends decided to start our own company, our own management company. And we went out and we raised some money, and we were the only Black-owned management company in Hollywood. Our company was called The Mission Entertainment. It still exists. We manage everybody from Lena Waithe to Rada Blank, who won Sundance a few years ago, and some great actors and filmmakers and so on and so forth. And our company was very much a cultural hub for multicultural artists. So on any given day, you could come into our office and you might see some people like in the backyard doing a table read, or you might come in a different day and you see somebody doing like an interview with some publication, or you might just come in another day and see somebody just trading creative ideas or having somebody comb through their script and give them feedback. It was like we wanted to foster a safe space for artists of color. And we did that. And a couple of years into us having our company, the bigger companies in town started to take notice, and CAA, which is where I had formerly interned and where my partner had formerly been an assistant, reached out to us and asked us if we would be interested in coming over and being movie agents. And, you know, me and my partner sat down and we were like, you know, this is an opportunity for one of us, maybe both of us, but at least one of us to make an impact from within the system. So I left, I ended up raising my hand and I left my small company that I was one of the co-owners of, and a situation where I was my own boss, and I went to the biggest talent agency in Hollywood. And I stepped in as a motion picture agent. Over the course of my career, I represented everybody from like the showrunner of Insecure to the director of Queen and Slim to musicians like Lenny Kravitz or A$AP Rocky or Georgia Smith, like just helping people, you know, bring their dreams and their ambitions to reality. And my favorite part about being an agent was I was able to affect change from inside of like the infrastructure of Hollywood. So when I started at that agency, there were only a couple of Black agents across film and TV. And by the time I left, there were double-digit agents of color, you know, who looked like me there. And I was only at that agency for 4 years and some change. I wasn't even there for 5 years. So like, you know, it was a lesson to me and a reminder to me that even though you can be an individual, you can actually have like a big systemic impact if you're like aligned with your purpose and what's important to you within this industry. And so I'm really grateful for my time there. I kind of always knew I didn't want to be an agent for too long. And a few years in, I started to kind of get an itch to do something different. And one of my closest mentors in our industry is a man named Charles King, who used to be an agent himself at WME, which is William Morris Endeavor, another really big agency in Hollywood. And he represented everybody from Prince to Oprah to Tyler Perry to Ryan Coogler, Michael B. Jordan. And we've always been really tight. And at the end of 2019, I decided to join up with him. And I was one of the founders of his company, Macro's management company, which is called M88. M88 is a sister company to Macro, the company Charles started. And so I left CAA. I went over to Macro. I was one of the founding partners of that management group. And today that group manages everybody from Michael B. Jordan to Damson Idris from Snowfall to Taraji P. Henson, Ryan Coogler still, a bunch of just great artists of color. You know, the plan was always for me to spend a short amount of time helping him launch the management group, but then transition full-time to producing. And after a year of me being there, I started that company in 2020, right before the pandemic started. At the end of 2020, I had a decision to make, and I decided to segue full-time into producing film and TV. And for me, after spending, you know, over a decade of my career representing artists, it was a big pivot for me. But what I understood was, you know, I didn't see too many producers my age who looked like me, who had my taste in music and art and just like the nuances of different aspects of what's important culturally. I didn't see many people who were built like me. And so I saw an opportunity for me to step into a new role and kind of get revitalized. You know, I think whether they say life is usually cycles of 4, right? Like college is 4 years, high school's 4 years. I spent over 11 years representing artists. So I think it was just time for me to do something different. And I feel so inspired and excited to show up to work every day. In my current job, I read scripts and try to find things that I think need to be made and share with the world. And then I go make it happen. And I'm able to do that because I have the talent relationships by virtue of representing the artists, I have the executive relationships by virtue of negotiating dozens and dozens and dozens of deals over the years and closing, you know, locking artists into films and TV and shows and endorsement deals and everything, commercials and everything else. Had I not approached my career the way I approached it, I wouldn't be able to prosper in the current season I'm in. So that's the long and short of my story. I'm happy to answer any more specific questions. This should be conversational. You know, it's summertime, you guys are cooped up in a classroom, so let's make it fun.
So who has some questions for Jelani? I'm going to ask you to come up to the camera if possible to ask your questions. It can be, about anything he just shared with us, about producing, about being an agent. Yeah, you want to come out and up, Nick?
All right. Yeah, right. Okay, yeah. Hello, is there a specific... What is this? Okay. Sorry, there's just like some code. I think mute that one out. So, is there a specific type of like a thing that you like that you would like to oversee, like movies, TV shows, or anything like that? Is there anything like you prefer doing in your job?
Yeah, man. What's your name?
Oh, my name is Nick Cowder, K-U-D-E-R.
Nice to meet you, Nick. Hey, yeah, my favorite part about my job is interacting with art. You don't have to stand if you don't want to. It's all good. My favorite part of my job is like interacting with human beings. So like when you guys will all experience this as you make art, there's a lot of people that are involved in making a film or TV show. You know, it's not just like the actors or the director. you know, you have you have everybody on the crew, and that's like transportation drivers. And these are people who are like in, you know, workers unions, and they're usually the first people to set because they got to transport everybody from base camp to wherever you're shooting that day. And so like I love talking to those people and hearing their stories and hearing, you know, just hearing about the things they're observing, because all of everybody's energy when you make a movie is impactful. You know, like morale on a movie set is a really big thing. So I love talking to like the drivers or talking to people in craft services who are responsible for cooking for everybody every day, right? And they might not get like the recognition or the appreciation from everybody on set, or maybe they just made a bomb meal one day that was delicious and they're smiling ear to ear because everybody's like happy during their break. Or I love popping into like my cast's trailers between takes and workshopping notes with them and just making sure that their energy is right and that they have everything they need. That's the sort of stuff that energizes me, because it's a reminder that I'm getting paid to like work in the arts. You know, so many of my friends are working office jobs or behind desks, and I get to read and watch things and give creative notes, and it's just a really cool job, man. And I'm always learning, you know, like, I don't know if you guys are learning about like production design, for example, what goes into like making something period appropriate, you know? So say you have a movie set in like the 80s, you got to nail like everything within the set, you know? Are the appliances in this house like period appropriate, etc. I love stuff. I nerd out over stuff like that. So that's what I dig, Nick.
Thank you. Another question, Onyx, and then Amiko.
You said that you do a lot of reading scripts. Is there anything that you look for specifically in a script that makes you more likely to choose it?
Yeah, Onyx is a cool name, by the way. It's very cool. Yeah, for sure. I look for things that feel uniquely specific, right? Well, who like, there's something really universal about specificity. Meaning if you're from like Poland, a small like town in Poland, and you're writing about things that are unique to your experience, if you're descriptive enough, even though I'm from the United States and I live on the West Coast, I should be able to identify certain things in your story that resonate with me and my personal story. And so when I'm reading things, I'm usually looking for like, hey, does this feel like nobody else could have wrote it? I don't like things that feel too reactive to the marketplace or too derivative, or, you know, it should feel fresh, and bold and brave. You know, I think the best art is evocative. It makes you feel things that you didn't even know were sitting inside of you, or inspires feelings that you might not have even been ready to confront. And you kind of know it when you're engaging with it. So for me, when I'm reading things, I'm like, if it stands out in the pile of scripts, for better or worse, usually my intuition is like, okay, there might be something here, you know?
Miko, you want to come up?
Hi, so I guess like as a producer, what are challenges that you go through like on a day-to-day basis during your job, and how do you overcome those every day?
So the biggest thing that people are always talking about on any given production is like budget and time, right? When you're producing something, there's like a certain sort of structure you have to, like, you can't work past an X amount of numbers every day, right? If you work your crew too long, you're responsible for providing them with an additional meal, right? You have to pay them overtime, etc. There are rules in place to ensure that the standard of work and living is ideally healthy for everybody involved. I'm sure you guys know about the writer's strike and the actor's strike that are happening right now, right?
Yeah.
A big, like, the things that they're negotiating are things that are going to inform how people's experiences every day they show up to work. These are like really important things that need to be like handled with care, because you know how you spend your life is how you spend your life. And it's not about this stuff is ideally making art isn't about a bottom line. It's about we should be in service of the art, not the profits. So for me, a big one of the hardest things that I have to navigate producing or overseeing a project is making sure that everybody is safe and taken care of and nobody's being taken advantage of. And that could be somebody who's working in hair and makeup, you know, being talked to in a derogatory way by one of the members of the cast or crew, and me having to step in and making sure that like that gets handled and mediated. It could be, you know, a big issue this year was COVID. The past few years were COVID. You know, I know that we're not wearing our masks anymore, and it feels like society is kind of come back. But if you get COVID hasn't gone away. So if somebody on set gets it and passes it to everybody in their department, you might have to shut down production for a day or two or a week or whatever, assuming that you can't find a replacement. And so like stuff every day, it's like almost like being an athlete, and that you kind of know what plays to run. If you train well enough, you're prepared for whatever the game brings your way, but you can't predict how any given game is going to go. And that's what producing is like. You just wake up, you try to be well rested, you know, energetic, so that you can tackle whatever the issue that day is. But it's hard to forecast what the issue is going to be, but there's typically always an issue. And so it's my job to just be prepared to handle it.
Next question's coming on up.
Hi, my name's Swain. I have a question about how granular you get with like specifics such as like logistics or like finance, because you mentioned how you'll like hands-on read over scripts and other aspects like that, but maybe like do you do you have like people to handle this, or are you hands-on like managing all that?
That's a great question. It's a combination. So a big part of leadership is delegation. So there are usually like accountants, production accountants, and people who are overseeing the financials. But I have to sign off on that stuff. And it's my job to understand how all of that stuff works. You know, for financial stuff and for budgets, it's not too dissimilar to other departments in that typically you have an expert in that space, and they're tasked with making sure that everything stays on track. The same way that like if I am like my cinematographer will oversee like the light department, you know, and making sure that everything there is the way they want it to be. Or the same way that like my costume director will oversee the dressers and the people that work under their department, you know? So there are people in charge of every aspect of a film, but ultimately if we come in over budget or if there's some like negligence, it falls on the producer at the end of the day, because everybody on set is their responsibility. And as far as like getting granular with other aspects of a project, everybody's different. I'm pretty meticulous. So if I'm giving notes, I'll read through something multiple times. I tend to send my notes in like a page by page format. So you'll see, okay, here are my thoughts on page 7, here are my thoughts on page 11. Maybe we can tweak this sentence to this, XYZ. And it's always like in collaborations. I try not to be too prescriptive because if I was supposed to write the thing, I would be the one writing the thing. So you try to give the artist space to create and ideate. But that's just my approach to it.
More questions? Yeah, Jabril.
Hello.
What's up, Jabril?
Yeah,
So my first question is, I know you're working on Freaky Tales. What was it like working with Too Short? And then my next question,
Wait. Let me answer the first one, and then when I'm done answering the first one, I answer the second one.
okay.
sit right there.
I mean, I'm a hip hop like fanatic. I'm a hip hop head. Like I was born in the 80s. I grew up with hip hop, you know, and fun fact, Blow the Whistle is one of my father's favorite songs. So, I mean, Too Short, I'm not from Oakland. I'm not from the Bay Area. One of the writer directors of that film, Ryan Fleck, is born and raised in the Bay. And so the script inherently had a lot of Bay Area influence and a lot of reverence to that area of the country. And Too Short, you know, the movie's called Freaky Tales. So it's like, that's one of Short's most famous songs. And he's a character in the film. We got him to do a cameo in the film. He's an executive producer on the film. So because he was invested as an individual in the movie, working with him has been pretty wonderful and seamless because he's invested in the project, you know. So whether it's doing like voiceover stuff or we use a couple of his songs and, you know, over the course of the film's music composition and so on and so forth, it felt like any other partner on the film, you know. And what was dope is when you see people who might be like superstars in other spaces come into this space and kind of try to soak up everything like a sponge, absorb everything. Like he's on set as a novice, you know, he doesn't, in between takes, you know, he's learning from some of the more seasoned actors like Ben Mendelsohn or people like that he's working, or, you know, Dominique Thorne, who's a pro, you know, who's young, but she's like, you know, a very technically trained and sound actress. You know, Too Short is getting to act opposite them. So it was dope seeing him like humble himself and just show up and be a student of the art.
Thank you. My next question is, you mentioned how you're an agent and you worked at an agency and like actors and stuff were at agencies. How do filmmakers get into agencies?
It's a great question. Honestly, just through creating, you know, like whether it is a student short film or something that you did a Kickstarter for that's 10 minutes, or that script that you wrote that you submitted to like the Nichols Fellowship or all sorts of like programs and competitions, or like the Blacklist, like representatives, whether they're agents or managers, their job is to find talent and like, you know, invest in that talent, invest their time and energy in that talent in hopes of making commissions from them, right? So it seems cliche, but I promise you guys, if you treat this like your passion and not like a hobby, it'll get to the point where there's no way that the world won't have to engage with your art. You'll just have so much of it, whether it's, you know, you're in conversation and you've written three scripts and people they have no choice but to read the things you've created, or you're sending out a link to your short and it doesn't cost anybody but 12 minutes to watch it. And it's amazing. And then they're like, oh, it's like, you know, when you discover a cool new song and you feel cool because you're on it first, and then you want to tell people about it. It's not too dissimilar with finding filmmakers, whether it's directors, writers, etc. So rather than wait for somebody to you know, extend their arm to you, force them to extend their arm just by virtue of the things you have under your belt or your pocket being undeniable. That's my advice. And with iPhones and everything, like, there's less barriers to entry than ever before. You can go make something at 16 or 15 or whatever.
Any other questions? Anyone we haven't heard from? I know some of you, you make your own films, maybe some of you act. There's so many different types of questions. Yes, Maya, you want to come on up?
Hi, my name is Samaya.
Hey, Samaya.
Hi, my question is, I read an article, a few actually, that say that casting, like, nowadays tends to like to cast people who already have like either their own presence in the industry or a large following on social media. And I was wondering, how is it possible to like put yourself in a situation and get cast if they're only casting people who already have like this presence? And is that even true?
Are you an actress?
I'm an actress.
Nice. I love that. So my advice would be everybody's in such a rush to try to network like vertically. You go to like events and you say, oh, what can this person do for me? Or I know where they work. Let me try to like get over and get close to them. And in my experience, I find that artists are usually in community with other artists. And so when you create with the people you're in community with, everybody can win. So the writer gets to work with their friend who's a director, who gets to direct a dope script that their friend who's a writer worked. You guys can cast, then they can cast their friends who are actors or actresses. And it's like this group of people, this little family of creatives have gone out and like made something. And if you look at like the film and television, let's say the film industry, historically, there are cohorts of creatives who've come up together, right? So like, for example, let's just say Martin Scorsese. He made Raging Bull with Joe Pesci. He made Casino with Joe Pesci. He made The Irishman with Joe Pesci. He made Goodfellas with Joe Pesci. He made Mean Streets with Robert De Niro. He made Goodfellas with Robert De Niro. Like, this is like a 40-year relationship with an actor. Or you look at like Spike Lee, and Giancarlo Esposito and Michael Rappaport and obviously Denzel Washington. And, these are Wesley Snipes has done multiple things with him. These are people who like were working with him from basically film school on to like, critical acclaim, or the relationship between Michael B. Jordan and Ryan Coogler. When Ryan Coogler was coming out of USC, Fruitvale Station was his like, he wrote that in school. That was in the Sundance labs. Michael B. Jordan was coming from doing The Wire and a couple other things, but he wasn't like established. He wasn't like the guy in his space. And it was the right marriage between filmmaker and script and brotherhood and friendship. And then those two guys get to go make Creed together, and then they go make Black Panther together, and he's Killmonger. And next thing you know, boom, movie star. So I think that find your friends whose art you respect and who you admire as just like human beings, and people who are kind and nurturing and like people you'd be proud to be a community with, and go create with them. And don't worry about anybody else putting you on. That's the easiest way to put yourself on.
Thank you.
Yeah, no doubt.
Great question. Any other questions? I'm curious. So the students right now, we're about to go into pre-production. As a producer, what do you think are some of the most like key points of having a really successful pre-production to help us have as smooth as possible of a production and post-production?
Can somebody tell me what you guys are making?
Make the short films.
Do you
Well,
want to tell us about your short films, Maya? Sorry to put you on the
I could-
spot.
Yeah.
So my group is making a short film. And it's about like grief and regret, about like relationships you had with someone who passed away. And
Wow.
basically it's about this girl, and she's passed away, but she doesn't realize it yet. And she wakes up before she's like transitions fully to the afterlife. She wakes up in her sister's boarding school, where she finds objects and things that her sister owned that triggers memories of her. And at first it starts off with like all the negative memories, and it kind of just like amplifies that regret that she feels. And then she finds the reason that her sister died, which was from overdose. And suddenly she starts to be flooded with like the good memories, and because she now has like empathy and a new understanding of her sister, and she starts to see the positive parts of their relationship. And then at the very end, she's reunited with her sister.
That's so dope. I love it. How many different projects are you guys doing? How many different
There's
films are?
three different films, three different groups.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's sweet. So my advice, that's a great question. My advice is to try to spend as much time together, just like in fellowship, before you get into like the daily grind of production. So, you know, whatever you can do to like foster community and trust with one another, it'll organically make production easier, because you really don't know what sort of, it might rain one day, all sorts of things can happen. But if you feel like, okay, we are teammates, we have each other's back, we have fostered trust and like a real like creative intimacy with one another, it makes the process not only like smoother, but also more fun, you know? So I would try to put it in that, make sure you guys are getting like personal time before, you know, in addition to work time, and make sure you're well rested, and just try to step into each day without any ego, because that can block creativity and block collaboration, and just, you know, recognize that you're going to do something really, really fun and cool, and what a blessing that is.
Thank you. Any other questions from our students? Think about your projects and any questions or challenges you feel like you might experience during the pre-production phase. No. I'm curious. Oh,
So can I
I
throw?
see Keith has a question. So Keith's question is,
I'll say it, Jelani.
Hey, Keith.
So, hey, so a lot of the kids, you know, they come into this with filmmaking, they want to be directors. Can you talk a little bit about the other important roles, because and why it's important to get skilled and versed at everything from sound or the editing, or you know, something that might not be as glamorous. You know, when a teen thinks about making movies, they want to be the director, but there's so many components to it. And then I have another question about acting after that as well.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if people do this that much anymore, but I really used to love to watch films with the director's commentary. There's a lot of them on YouTube. There's some of them used to be able to watch them on DVD, because they would talk about the little things that the people, they call it below the line. It's like crew, so it's sound, wardrobe, hair, makeup, lights, etc. They would talk about like the things that they do that really go into making a movie great. And then the beautiful thing is, once you're aware of all of those different departments, you start to watch films in a different way. Like I remember when as most of you guys seen A Quiet Place, right? The movie, the film about the aliens and the having to be quiet. The sound design in that movie is pretty incredible. You know, like I'm excited. I haven't seen Oppenheimer yet. I'm gonna go tonight. I'm looking forward to like the sound just as much as the visuals, because I'm sure that Christopher Nolan has done some, and his crew have done some pretty like forward-thinking things with sound in that movie. The other thing is, like, this is a business. You can work for a long time if you're an expert in something that's not just directing and acting. And it can be really rewarding. And if you are a filmmaker, you're gonna want to know every aspect of filmmaking anyway. So, because your DNA, your name is on it. So just being fluent in what every department is doing is imperative to having the end product come out the way you visualize it. You don't want to leave anything. If you're a writer, if you're a director, let's just say director, even a writer, and it's your baby, you don't want to leave anything to chance. You want to at least know why things turn out the way they turn out, because ideally you're making movies for the long haul, and there will be other films you make or other pieces of content that you make, and understanding what happened and why it happened will make you stronger and stronger for the next one and the next one. Did I answer the question, Keith?
Yeah, that was great. Thanks.
Okay, cool.
The other thing I wanted to have you talk to the students about was, since they are all working on, each of their projects, they're going to have to act, and maybe, Samaya has acted, but many of the other students probably haven't acted before. Can you talk, since you've worked with actors a lot, and you've maybe been on set with people, you were talking before about working with Too Short and, people who haven't acted before, what kind of healthy environment can you provide on a set when you have people who've never done it before, and they want to get the best artistic vision out in these shorts that they do, so they really want to encourage their collaborators to do the best that they can, but they're going to be nervous and they're going to be anxious, and they've just met each other, so it's also hard to be vulnerable when you're acting right in front of other people, but it's even harder when you don't know these people at all. So any little bits of advice you can throw their way. And I don't even know if the students, have you decided who's going to be acting in your chat, or are you too early on for that?
They've already decided, yes.
Okay. Is anyone, raise your hand if you're acting in your short and you've never acted before?
All of you have acted before.
Ooh.
Wow, okay. That's cool.
I still think they could take the advice.
Look, man, it seems like they're seasoned. My advice, I think that leadership shows up in different ways, and the opportunities arise for leadership sometimes when you don't expect it. So in the spirit of community, like I was talking about, and just being teammates to one another, for those who are more confident as actors, if you find yourself across from a scene mate and they might not be on the level you're at, just lead with love, because that's going to help them settle into whatever the role is and whatever the scene is, and maybe get out of their head, and encourage them. And at the end of the day, life will go on, but these relationships ideally last for a long time. And it's not that serious. I know everything seems serious, even for me. I'm producing things that cost millions and millions of dollars, and at the end of the day, it's not that serious. So yeah, I think it's an opportunity for people to be good teammates and friends to one another, and inspire confidence in those who might be a little bit more intimidated.
Amazing. Any other questions for the students? If not, I have a question. I think you already spoke about this a little bit, about your intentions and kind of goals in the industry of changing it from within. I'm curious what your own hopes and dreams for the film industry is moving forward in the future.
I just hope that we can tell honest and authentic stories that could be through the lens of a science fiction movie. It could be something that feels more intimate and family oriented, or geographically or socially specific. I personally am not a huge fan of I'm kind of exhausted by the big spectacle stuff. I don't know how much further we can push it, but between the video games and the superhero movies, I feel like I've seen every type of fight sequence you can see. What really resonates with me is things that are rooted in character, strong character, good writing, and just really intentional filmmaking and attention to detail. Those are the things I like. So I would like our industry at large to get back to that. And now it's not even to say that we've even left that. But I do think that there needs to be a small recalibration to get back to some of the essence of what filmmaking is all about. And again, I think that's part of what some of these strikes are about, and but some of the turmoil in our industry is about. There has been a corruption of sorts that's been led by the pursuit of profit. So my hopes for the future are that we can tap back into the essence.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. That's all the time we have with Jelani today, but thank you so much again for taking the time to speak with our students. I hope you get to, see some of their, work in the upcoming years as they go. Some of them go off to film school and continue to create their own amazing short films. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys. I'm so happy to speak with you, and good luck making your films for sure.